The metal chair felt cold against Commander Zexthel's scaled skin. His 4 yellow eyes looked around the white room on Station Nexus 7. 3 beings sat across from him at a long table. They were from different worlds, all part of the Galactic War Crimes Tribunal. The Corvanian commander's hands shook slightly as he reached for the water glass. "State your name and rank for the record," said the lead investigator, a tall blue-skinned Altarian. "Commander Zexthel of the Corvanian Imperial." "Navy, 4th Fleet," he replied. His voice was rough, like sand scraping against stone. "I served for 23 standard years before the human conflicts." The investigator made notes on his datapad. "You were present during the human-Corvanian border wars from 2387 to 2391? Zexthel nodded slowly. "I was there for all of it. Every battle, every mistake we made." He paused and took a sip of water. "You want to know about the humans? About what they did to us? That is why we are here, Commander. The Galactic Council needs to understand what happened during those conflicts." The Corvanian's mandibles clicked together nervously. This was a habit his species had when they felt afraid or stressed. "Where do I begin? With how wrong we were about them? With how they fought like no civilized species should fight? Start at the beginning. Tell us about first contact with human military forces." Zexthel leaned back in his chair. His eyes grew, distant as he remembered. "We thought they were nothing. Just another primitive species that had barely learned to travel between stars. Our intelligence reports said they were weak, scattered across many small colonies. No real military power." He stood up and walked to the small window that looked out into space. "The High Command gave me orders to patrol their border systems. They said it would be easy duty, like watching over children with toy weapons." "What changed your mind about humans?" asked the second investigator, a reptilian Vorthan. "Everything changed at Kepler 442. Zexthel turned back to face them. That was our first real fight with them. I commanded 12 heavy cruisers. Good ships with experienced crews. We had been fighting wars for centuries before humans even discovered fire." The investigators waited as he sat back down. They could see the fear in his eyes when he talked about that battle. "We found one human ship in the system, just one. It was called the UES Liberty. Our scanners showed it had maybe 200 crew members. We had over 7,000 soldiers across our fleet." Zexthel laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "We thought it would surrender when it saw us. What happened instead? Their captain, Jake Morrison, sent us a message. I still remember his exact words. He said, 'You picked the wrong species to mess with.' Then he did something no sane military commander would ever do." The room was very quiet. Outside, ships moved silently through space, but inside, everyone focused on the alien's words. "He charged us. 1 ship against 12. But not in any way we understood. Morrison didn't try to run or hide behind asteroids. He didn't form a defensive position or call for help. He flew straight at us like he wanted to ram our ships." Zexthel's voice got quieter. "At first, we thought he was going to try some kind of suicide attack. But then we saw what they had done to their ship. They had added extra armor plating all over the hull. They had turned their cargo holds into weapon storage areas. They had modified their engines to run much hotter than safe levels. The Liberty was no longer just a transport ship. It was a weapon. The humans had turned their entire vessel into a giant missile aimed at us." The Altarian investigator looked up from his notes. "Ramming attacks are not unknown in galactic warfare. Many species have used them as last resort tactics. But not like this," Zexthel said quickly. "Most species ram enemy ships when they are about to lose, when they have no other choice. The humans chose ramming as their first option. They planned it from the beginning. He began pacing again. Morrison brought his ship right into the center of our formation. Our captains didn't know how to react. We had trained for normal space battles with proper tactics. We were not ready for someone who wanted to crash into us on purpose. The Liberty rammed our flagship first. The impact was so hard, cracked our main hull. But Morrison's ship kept moving. It was like watching a wild animal attack a herd of peaceful creatures. The human ship hit 2 more of our cruisers before its engines finally exploded. The third investigator, a crystalline being from the Zephyr colonies, spoke for the first time. 3 ships destroyed by ramming? That seems like a poor exchange rate for the humans. Zexthul stopped pacing and stared at the crystal being. That is what we thought too. We lost 3 ships, they lost 1. By normal military math, we won that battle, but we were wrong about everything. How so? Because Jake Morrison and his crew were not trying to win a battle. They were sending a message to every human in the galaxy. The message was simple. Corvanians can be beaten. Their ships can be destroyed. They bleed and die just like anyone else. The commander sat down heavily. Within days, every human military unit knew exactly how Morrison had modified his ship. They knew which parts of our hulls were weakest. They knew how our captains reacted under pressure. One battle gave them all the information they needed to start a real war. But there is something else, something worse. Zexthul's voice dropped to almost a whisper. When we recovered the wreckage of the Liberty, we found Morrison's personal logs. We thought we would learn about human military plans or find strategic information. Instead, we found something that made no sense to us. Morrison had been laughing during the attack. His crew was joking and making casual conversation while they prepared to die. The ship's communications officer was taking bets on which Corvanian vessel they would hit first. The investigators exchanged glances. This was not normal behavior for most species. They were having fun, Zexthul continued. 200 humans flying to certain death, and they were enjoying themselves. Morrison's final log entry was recorded just minutes before impact. He said, "If anyone finds this, tell command that. Ramming works great. Try it on their bigger ships next time." The room fell silent again. The implications of what the commander was saying began to sink in. That was when I first realized we were not fighting a normal species. We were fighting something that treated war like a game, something that could laugh while dying, something that learned from defeat and became stronger. Zexthul looked directly at each investigator. Kepler 442 was not the end of anything. It was just the beginning. And if you think one ship ramming our fleet was disturbing, wait until you hear what they did next. Commander Zexthul drank more water before continuing his story. The investigators sat quietly, waiting for him to speak again. His 4 eyes looked at each of them before he began. After Kepler 442, the High Command was angry. They said Morrison's attack was just luck. One crazy human captain with a death wish. They sent Admiral Vorthek with a full battle fleet to crush the humans once and for all. The Corvanians stood up and walked around the room. I was promoted to fleet commander after that first battle. Vorthak wanted me to lead the advance forces. He said my experience fighting humans would be useful. How many ships did Admiral Vorthak bring? Asked the Altarian investigator. 60 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyers, and 20 support vessels, plus 30,000 ground troops for planetary invasion. The Admiral was sure this force could defeat any human resistance. Zexthul stopped walking and faced the window again. We chose New Eden Colony as our first target. Intelligence said it had about 50,000 human civilians and maybe 2,000 soldiers. An easy victory to start the campaign. But the humans were ready for us? Asked the Vorthan. They were more than ready. they had been preparing for. Months. The commander's voice grew quiet. Colonel Lisa Harper commanded the defense. She did things that no civilized military officer would ever consider. He turned back to the investigators. When our scouts arrived at New Eden, they found empty cities. No people walking the streets. No vehicles moving. No signs of life anywhere. We thought the humans had run away. Had they evacuated? No. They were all still there. But they had gone underground. Literally underground. Zexthal sat down again. The humans had spent months digging tunnels under their cities. Not just simple hiding places. They had created an entire second city beneath the first one. The crystalline investigator made notes. Underground defensive positions are common military tactics. Not like this, Zexthal said firmly. Most species dig tunnels to hide from bombs or to move troops safely. The humans dug tunnels to turn their planet into a weapon. He leaned forward on the table. Dr. Alex Chun was their chief engineer. He had connected every building basement to the tunnel system. Every sewer pipe, every subway tunnel, every underground parking area. The humans could move anywhere in their cities without ever coming to the surface. That gave them tactical mobility, observed the Altarian. It gave them much more than that. Chun had filled the tunnel system with explosives. Not just bombs placed here and there. The entire underground network was one giant explosive device. The humans could blow up any building, any street, any block whenever they wanted. Zexthal's mandibles clicked rapidly. Our ground forces landed in the main city center. Standard invasion protocol. Secure the government buildings, control the population, establish communication networks. But there was nobody to control. The buildings were empty shells, and the attacks began. Human soldiers would appear from manholes in the street. They would shoot at our troops, then disappear back underground before we could return fire. Sometimes they came out of building basements. Sometimes they climbed out of storm drains. The commander stood up again and began pacing. Lieutenant Colonel Bobby Martinez led these attack squads. His soldiers moved through the tunnels like water flowing through pipes. They would hit our supply convoys on one side of the city, then attack our communication posts on the other side 20 minutes later. How were they moving so quickly underground? They had vehicles down there. Cars, trucks, even motorcycles modified for tunnel fighting. Plus, they knew every passage, every shortcut, every hidden route. We were fighting blind while they could see everything. Zexthal stopped pacing. But the worst part was not the attacks themselves. It was how the humans fought. They used weapons that no proper military would ever use. What kind of weapons? Kitchen knives welded to rifle barrels for close combat. Cleaning chemicals mixed together to make poison gas. Farming equipment modified into armor suits. They turned civilian items into military gear. The Vorthan investigator looked confused. Why not use standard military weapons? Because they had run out of standard weapons. Or maybe because they wanted to prove a point. I never understood which. Zexthal shook his head. Sergeant Rita Johnson's unit captured one of our communication arrays. We thought they would destroy it to stop our coordination. They did not destroy it? No, they used it against us. Johnson's people began broadcasting messages to our entire fleet, but not military communications. They broadcast recordings of wounded human soldiers. The commander's voice became very quiet. The recordings showed humans who had been shot, burned, or injured in explosions. But they were not crying or begging for help. They were laughing, making jokes about their wounds, talking about what they wanted to eat for dinner. I heard one recording of a human medic treating a soldier who had lost his arm. The medic was telling funny stories while he worked. The wounded soldier was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. They acted like losing an arm was just a minor inconvenience. The investigators exchanged looks. This behavior made no sense to most galactic species. Another recording showed human officers planning their next attack while artillery shells exploded around them. They were not taking cover or showing any fear. One officer was eating a sandwich. Another was reading a book. They discussed battle tactics the same way most people discuss weather. Zexthal sat down heavily. These broadcasts were played constantly on all our communication channels. Every Corvanian soldier heard them. The effect was devastating. How so? Our troops began to think humans could not feel pain or fear. They believed humans were some kind of machines that looked like living beings. Some soldiers refused to fight because they thought humans were already dead and could not be killed. Again, others became convinced that humans were demons or evil spirits. In Corvanian culture, only the dead laugh at their own wounds. Only evil beings enjoy violence and destruction. The commander rubbed his scaled forehead. Colonel Martinez made everything worse with his psychological warfare. His units would leave signs of their presence everywhere. Human footprints in the mud outside our camps. Human food left where our soldiers would find it. Human weapons abandoned in places where our troops had to walk. The message was clear. Humans could go anywhere, anytime. We were never safe, never secure, never alone. Even when we could not see them, they were watching us. How long did the battle for New Eden last? Asked the crystalline being. Officially, 6 weeks, but we never really controlled the planet. Every day brought new attacks, new surprises, new tactics we had never seen before. Our forces were constantly under stress, constantly afraid, constantly looking over their shoulders. Zexthal looked directly at the investigators. In the end, Admiral Vorthak ordered a full retreat. He said we needed to rethink our approach to fighting humans. But I knew the real reason, which was we were beaten. Not by superior technology or larger numbers. We were beaten by an enemy that fought like no civilized species should fight. An enemy that enjoyed war more than peace. An enemy that laughed at death and treated violence like entertainment. The commander's voice dropped to a whisper. And New Eden was just one small colony. If humans fought this hard for one unimportant planet, what would they do to defend their homeworld? What would they do if we truly threatened their species? I began to have nightmares about human laughter echoing through our ship corridors. About human soldiers appearing in my personal quarters. About humans watching me, even when I was alone. He looked at each investigator again. That was when I realized we were not fighting a war. We were fighting for our sanity against an enemy that had no limits, no rules, and no fear of death. Commander Zexthal was quiet for several minutes. The investigators waited patiently as he stared at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was even more troubled than before. After New Eden, we thought we understood human tactics. Underground. Tunnels, surprise attacks, psychological warfare. Admiral Vorthak created new battle plans to deal with these methods. We studied every recording from the colony fight. We trained our soldiers for tunnel combat. The Corvanian looked up at the investigators. Then came Proxima Station. That battle changed everything we thought we knew about warfare itself. Tell us about Proxima Station, said the Altarian investigator. It was a strategic supply depot. In the neutral zone, both sides wanted to control it because ships passing through that area needed fuel and repairs. The humans had been using it for 6 months when we decided to take it. Zexthal stood and walked to the window again. I commanded the assault force. 50,000 Corvanian troops against 5,000 human defenders. Our intelligence was very detailed this time. We knew every corridor, every room, every defensive position on the station. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the human defense. Our analyst said she was experienced, but not exceptional. Just another career military officer. We expected her to evacuate when she saw our fleet approaching. The commander turned back to face the room. Instead, Sullivan sent us a message. She said, "Welcome to Proxima Station. Hope you enjoy your stay." Then she cut all communications. What happened when your forces boarded the station? At first, everything seemed normal. The docking bays were empty. The corridors were quiet. No resistance at all. We thought maybe the humans had evacuated after all. Zexthel began pacing again. Then Captain Roy Davis activated something called Operation Madhouse. Suddenly, nothing on the station worked the way it should. What do? You mean? The gravity stopped working properly. One moment our soldiers were walking normally. The next moment they were floating in the air like balloons. Then suddenly, they would be crushed against the floor by gravity 3 times stronger than normal. The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly. Davis had modified the station's artificial gravity generators. The humans could control gravity in any section at any time. They had trained their soldiers to fight in changing gravity conditions. We had not. Our troops would enter a room in normal gravity. Halfway across, gravity would disappear and they would float helplessly. Then gravity would return suddenly and slam them into walls or ceilings. Meanwhile, human soldiers moved through these areas like they were dancing. The Vorthan investigator made notes. Gravity manipulation is a known technology, but using it as a weapon is unusual. Everything the humans did was unusual. Major Lisa Wong commanded squads that used the ventilation system as a weapon delivery method, not just for moving through the station, but for attacking us. Zexthel sat down again. Wong's troops pumped different gases through the air systems. Sometimes it was tear gas that made our soldiers cry and cough. Sometimes it was sleeping gas that made them fall unconscious. Sometimes it was just very bad smells that made them sick. But the worst was when they pumped in fear chemicals, compounds that made our soldiers panic and run away. We had to wear full environmental suits just to breathe safely. This made fighting much harder. The crystalline investigator looked up from its notes. Did the humans wear protective equipment too? That was the strangest part. The humans seemed immune to their own chemical weapons. Later, we learned they had been exposing themselves to small amounts of these chemicals for months. They had built up resistance while we had none. Zexthel's voice grew quieter. Colonel Danny Foster ran the Psychological Operations Unit. He took control of the station's communication systems and began broadcasting the most disturbing sounds I have ever heard. What kind of sounds? Human voices, but not normal military communications. Foster played recordings of humans reciting poetry while explosions happened in the background. Humans singing songs while firing weapons. Humans telling jokes while their friends died. The commander rubbed his forehead. One broadcast showed a human soldier reading a children's story while a battle raged around him. He never stopped reading, even when bullets hit the wall next to his head. He finished the entire story, then calmly reloaded his weapon and continued fighting. Another recording was of human officers discussing their favorite foods while planning an attack. They talked about recipes and restaurants, like they were having dinner together instead of preparing for combat. Zexthel looked directly at each investigator. But the most disturbing broadcast was humans laughing, just laughing, for hours and hours. Sometimes one voice, sometimes many voices together. They were not laughing at jokes or funny stories. They were laughing at nothing. Or maybe they were laughing at us. The psychological effect on our troops was devastating. Many soldiers refused to enter certain sections of the station because they were afraid of hearing human laughter. Others began laughing uncontrollably themselves, like the sound was contagious. The Altarian investigator leaned forward. How? Did the battle end? Admiral Sullivan recorded everything. Every tactical method we used, every weapon we deployed, every mistake we made. Then she transmitted all this information to every human military unit in the sector. Zexthel's voice became very quiet. She turned our attack into a training exercise for other human forces. While we were fighting to take the station, she was teaching other humans how to defeat us. After 3 days of fighting, Sullivan contacted me directly. I thought she was finally ready to surrender. Our forces controlled most of the station. Her defenders were trapped in the central hub. What did she say? She said, "Commander Zexthel, this has been educational. Thank you for the tactical demonstration. You have 30 minutes to evacuate your forces. Before we activate the station's self-destruct sequence." The investigators all looked surprised. Self-destruct? The humans had wired the entire station with explosives from the beginning. They were never trying to hold the station. They were using it as bait to study our attack methods. When they had learned enough, they were ready to destroy it completely. Zexthel stood up and walked around the room. Sullivan was not negotiating. Our surrender. She was giving us a chance to escape before she killed everyone on the station, including her own troops. The most disturbing part was her tone of voice. She sounded like she was discussing the weather. Casual, friendly, almost cheerful. Like destroying a space station and killing thousands of people was just a normal part of her day. I ordered immediate evacuation. As our ships pulled away, Sullivan sent one final message. She said, "Please tell your superiors that Proxima Station was a learning experience. We look forward to our next educational opportunity." The commander sat down heavily. Then the station exploded. The blast was so bright, it could be seen from 3 star systems away. 5,000 human defenders died instantly. They had chosen death over defeat. But they achieved their goal. Every human military commander now knew exactly how we attacked space stations. They knew our weaknesses, our tactics, our equipment capabilities. One battle gave them everything they needed to defeat us in future engagements. Zexthel looked at the investigators with fear in his 4 eyes. That was when I realized humans did not fight wars to win territory or resources. They fought wars to learn how to fight better wars. Every battle was just practice for the next battle. And they were willing to die for practice. They were willing to sacrifice their own people just to gather information about their enemies. What kind of species does that? The room was very quiet. Outside the window, ships moved peacefully through space. But inside, everyone was thinking about a species that treated death as education and war as entertainment. Admiral Sullivan's final transmission is still classified by human military. Command. But I heard it before our evacuation was complete. What did she say? Zexthula's voice dropped to a whisper. She said, "Note to command. Gravity weapons are highly effective against Corvanian physiology. Chemical warfare causes panic responses. Psychological operations exceed expectations. Recommend expanding these methods for future engagements." End report. He looked at each investigator. She was filing a report. While dying in an explosion she had caused herself, Admiral Sullivan was still working, still thinking about how to kill more of us more efficiently. That was when I knew we could never win against humans. We were fighting an enemy that learned from death and grew stronger through defeat. Commander Zexthil took a long drink of water before continuing. His hands were shaking more now. The investigators could see that talking about these memories was very difficult for him. After Proxima Station, everything changed. The humans stopped playing defense. They began hunting us. The Corvanian's voice was barely above a whisper. General Patricia Moore launched something they called Operation Nightmare. The name was very accurate. "Tell us about this operation," said the Vorthan investigator. It was not like any military campaign in galactic history. The humans were not trying to capture territory or destroy our fleets. They were trying to break our minds. Sexthol stood up and began pacing again. Major Kevin Brown led their intelligence units. He had spent months studying everything about Corvanian biology, psychology, and culture. The humans knew things about us that we did not know. About ourselves. What kind of things? They discovered that Corvanians evolved from prey animals millions of years ago. Deep in our genetics, we still carry instincts that make us afraid of persistent predators. Brown found ways to trigger these ancient fears. The commander stopped, pacing, and faced the investigators. Colonel Steve Jackson commanded the units that put this knowledge to use. His troops began stalking us like predators hunting prey, not attacking to win battles, but attacking to create fear. Jackson's forces would hit our supply convoys with small groups of soldiers, just enough to cause damage and disappear. Then, they would vanish for days. Our patrols would search everywhere, but find nothing. Just when we thought they had left the area, they would attack again from a completely different direction. Zexthol sat down heavily. The attacks followed no pattern we could understand. Sometimes they used explosives. Sometimes they used sniper weapons. Sometimes they just left threatening messages where our soldiers would find them. What kind of messages? Simple things that became terrifying because of the context. Notes. That said, we see you, left in secure areas where humans should not have been able to go. Food packages with human names written on them, placed in our officers' quarters. Pictures of Corvanian soldiers taken from hidden cameras. The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly. Dr. Nancy White was their xenobiologist. She had become a military advisor and created weapons designed specifically for Corvanian physiology. Acoustic weapons. Sound frequencies that caused us physical pain and mental distress. The humans would broadcast these sounds from hidden speakers placed throughout areas where our troops had to patrol. Some frequencies made us feel sick to our stomachs. Others caused severe headaches that lasted for hours. The worst ones triggered panic attacks that made our soldiers run away screaming. Zexthol rubbed his forehead. But the sounds were not constant. They would play for a few minutes, then stop for hours. This made them even more frightening, because we never knew when they would start again. Our soldiers began wearing hearing protection constantly. But this made communication difficult and reduced their combat effectiveness. The humans achieved their goal without firing a single shot. The crystalline investigator made notes. These seem like standard psychological warfare techniques. You would think so. But the humans took psychological warfare far beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. Zexthol's voice grew quieter. Captain Joe Miller led specialized teams that targeted our cultural and religious sites. They did not destroy these places. That would have made us angry and more determined to fight. Instead, they did something much more disturbing. What did they do? They left signs that humans had been there. Small changes that showed they could reach any place, any time. Religious artifacts moved slightly from their proper positions. Human food left in sacred spaces where only Corvanians were supposed to enter. Tiny human flags planted in ceremonial locations. Messages written in human languages on the walls of our most secure buildings. Pictures of human soldiers standing next to important Corvanian monuments. Zexthol stood up and walked to the window. The psychological message was clear. Humans could go anywhere we could go. No place was safe from them. No security was strong enough to keep them out. Our soldiers began reporting that humans were everywhere. In the walls, in the ventilation systems, behind every corner. Even when no humans were actually present, our troops thought they could sense them watching. Many Corvanian officers requested transfers to other combat zones. They preferred fighting any other species rather than humans. Some soldiers refused to patrol certain areas because they were convinced humans were hiding there. The Altarian investigator looked up from his notes. How did your command structure respond to these reports? At first, the High Command did not believe the reports. They thought our soldiers were imagining things or making excuses for poor performance. But then the incidents began affecting senior officers too. Zexthel turned back to face the room. Corporal Amy Clark led a reconnaissance unit that infiltrated our main military base on Korvax Prime. This was supposed to be the most secure facility in Corvanian space. They penetrated the base's defenses without triggering any alarms. They moved through restricted areas without being detected by guards or sensors. They reached the personal quarters of Admiral Vekmer, the supreme commander of all Corvanian forces. What did they do? They left a single item on his bed, a small earth toy called a teddy bear. It was brown and soft, obviously designed for human children. Attached to it was a note written in perfect Corvanian language. Zexthel's voice became very quiet. The note said, "Sweet dreams, Admiral. We will be watching." It was signed with a simple human smiley face drawing. The psychological impact was devastating. If humans could reach the Supreme Commander's private bedroom, they could reach anyone, anywhere. No Corvanian was safe from human infiltration. Admiral Vekmer increased security around all military installations. He tripled guard patrols and installed new sensor systems. But this only made our troops more nervous because it confirmed that the threat was real. The Vorthan investigator leaned forward. Did these psychological attacks affect you personally? Commander? Zexthel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Yes, I began having nightmares about human laughter echoing through our ship corridors. I would wake up thinking I heard footsteps in the walls. During the day, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. Every shadow seemed like it might hide a human soldier. Every unexpected sound made me jump with fear. Other officers reported similar experiences. Some began sleeping with weapons next to their beds. Others refused to eat food that had been out of their sight for even a few minutes. The humans had achieved something no enemy in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had made us afraid of being alone, afraid of quiet spaces, afraid of our own shadows. The commander sat down again, but the worst part was not the fear itself. It was knowing that humans were doing this to us on purpose. They had studied our psychology and found exactly the right ways to break our minds. Every action was calculated to cause maximum psychological damage. Every attack was designed to create specific fears. The humans were not just fighting a war, they were conducting a scientific experiment on terror. And we were the test subjects. Zexthel looked at each investigator with haunted eyes. I realized that humans did not just fight with weapons and tactics. They fought with fear itself. They had weaponized terror and used it more effectively than any army. By the end of Operation Nightmare, half of our forces were requesting medical leave for psychological trauma. The other half were too scared to admit they were having problems. General Moore had succeeded in breaking the Corvanian military without destroying a single ship or killing a single soldier. She had defeated us by making us defeat ourselves. The room was very quiet. Outside, the peaceful stars seemed to mock the horror of what they had just heard. That was when I knew we had to surrender, Zexthel whispered. We were not fighting an enemy. We were fighting our own worst nightmares come to life. Commander Zexthel was quiet for a very long time. The investigators could see tears forming in his 4 eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a fear that seemed to go deeper than anything they had heard before. What I am about to tell you will change how you think about humans forever. It changed everything for the Corvanian Empire. It ended the war in a way none of us expected. The Altarian investigator leaned forward. What happened, Commander? Fleet Admiral Carroll. Stevens contacted the Corvanian High Command directly, not to demand our surrender or negotiate peace terms. She invited our leaders to witness something that no galactic species had ever seen before. Zexthul stood up and walked to the window. His reflection looked back at him from the dark glass. Admiral Stevens said she wanted to show us the truth about human warfare. She said we had been fighting them without understanding what they really were. She arranged for me and several senior Corvanian officers to observe a human military training exercise on a planet called Darwin III. Stevens said this demonstration would explain everything about human combat capabilities. The commander turned back to face the investigators. We thought we would see advanced weapons or new battle tactics, maybe secret technology that gave humans their advantages in combat. We were completely wrong. What did you see instead? We saw humans training to fight other humans. Zexthul's voice became very quiet. Not aliens, not enemy species. Their own people. The crystalline investigator looked confused. Training exercises between military units are common throughout the galaxy. This was not a training exercise. Zexthul sat down heavily. Captain Gary Thompson's unit was trying to kill Major Helen Rodriguez's forces with real weapons, real explosives, real ammunition. The humans were practicing urban combat in a mock city, but they were not using practice rounds or simulation equipment. They were shooting live bullets at each other. They were throwing real grenades. They were trying to actually kill their own soldiers. The investigators exchanged glances. This made no sense according to normal military procedures. I watched human soldiers die during this training, shot by their own comrades, killed by explosions set by their own people. And the other humans acted like this was completely normal. Zexthul's mandibles clicked rapidly. Dr. Frank Lee was a human military historian. He explained to us that humans had been perfecting warfare techniques for thousands of years through constant fighting among themselves. He said every tactic they had used against us was originally developed for human versus human combat. The ramming attacks, the psychological warfare, the tunnel fighting, the chemical weapons. All of it came from humans fighting other humans. But that means ... double quotes, the Vorthan investigator began. Yes, it means humans are the most dangerous enemy they have ever faced, because their most dangerous enemy is themselves. And they have been fighting that enemy for their entire history. Zexthul stood up and began pacing again. Dr. Lee showed us historical records of human wars, conflicts that lasted for decades, battles that killed millions of people, weapons that could destroy entire planets. He told us about something called the World Wars, where humans killed over 100 million of their own species, about nuclear weapons that could turn whole continents into poisonous wastelands, about chemical weapons designed specifically to cause maximum suffering. And the humans had created all of these weapons to use against each other, not against alien threats, against other humans. The commander stopped pacing and looked directly at the investigators. Colonel Peter Johnson showed us how human children learned about warfare. They played games called war games, using toy weapons and competitive scenarios. Human parents were teaching their offspring to fight and kill. From early childhood, they treated violence as entertainment, as education, as a normal part of growing up. Johnson brought several human children to demonstrate. The youngest was maybe 6 years old. She could field strip a rifle, plan tactical maneuvers, and discuss military strategy better than some of our trained officers. Zexthul's voice became filled with horror. The children were laughing while they talked about weapons and killing. They thought war was fun. They enjoyed learning about different ways to hurt people. But the most shocking revelation came from General Mary Taylor. She explained that the human-Corvanian conflict was considered a minor border skirmish by human military standards. Minor? She showed us classified reports from human high command. The forces that had defeated our fleets were listed as reserve. Units and training personnel. The humans had never deployed their real military against us. Zexthal sat down and put his head in his hands. General Taylor said that human elite combat units were busy fighting other human elite combat units in ongoing conflicts across human space. She said fighting aliens was not considered important. Enough to interrupt human versus human warfare. Admiral Stevens concluded the demonstration by revealing the most terrifying truth of all. She said that humanity's greatest military victories had never been against alien species. They had been against other humans. She told us that humans had created weapons capable of destroying stars, poisons that could kill entire ecosystems, and computer viruses that could shut down civilization itself, all designed for use against other humans. The room was completely silent. The investigators struggled to understand what they were hearing. "But why did Admiral Stevens show you all of this?" asked the Altarian. "Because she wanted us to understand what we were really fighting. Not just one human military, but a species that had spent millennia turning violence into an art form. A species that had evolved through constant warfare with the most dangerous enemy they could face." Zexthal looked up at the investigators with eyes full of terror. Stevens explained that humans were persistence predators. They did not give up. They did not stop fighting. They learned from every defeat and became stronger. She said that every war humans fought made them better at fighting wars. Every enemy they faced taught them new ways to kill. Every defeat showed them how to win next time. And their ultimate enemy, their ultimate teacher, was themselves. Humans had been practicing warfare against opponents just as smart, just as adaptable, and just as ruthless as they were. The commander's voice dropped to a whisper. "Admiral?" Stevens said that fighting aliens was like taking a vacation for human soldiers. After spending their lives learning to kill other humans, fighting less advanced species was almost relaxing. She told us that humans had a saying, "If you want peace, prepare for war." But she said the human version was different. Humans prepared for war by fighting wars, constantly, against anyone available, preferably against each other. The demonstration ended with Stevens making an offer to the Corvanian High Command. She said humans would stop attacking us immediately if we agreed to never threaten human space again. But she also said that if we continued fighting, humans would stop treating the conflict as a training exercise and begin treating it as a real war. She said we did not want to see what humans did during real wars. Zexthal stood up and walked to the window one final time. I transmitted my report to the High Command that same day. I told them that we were not fighting a species that had learned warfare. We were fighting a species that had invented warfare and spent thousands of years perfecting it. The Corvanian Empire surrendered within hours of receiving my report. We ceded all disputed territories, established human space as a protected zone, and agreed to pay reparations for the conflict. But most importantly, we agreed to warn other species about what humans really are. Apex predators that have spent their entire evolutionary history learning to kill the most dangerous prey in the universe. He turned back to face the investigators one last time. Themselves. The commander's final words hung in the air like a death sentence. Never fight humans, unless you are prepared to fight the most successful killers in galactic history. A species that treats war as their natural state and violence as their greatest achievement. And remember this above all else. Every human you fight has been trained by other humans. Every tactic they use was tested against their own people. Every weapon they carry was designed to kill their own kind. Humans are not just dangerous because they are good at war. They are dangerous because war is what they are. It is what they have always been, and it is what they will always be. Zexthul sat down for the final time. That is my testimony to this tribunal. That is my warning to the galaxy. Stay away from humans. Let them fight each other. But never, ever make the mistake of fighting them yourself. Because if you do, you will learn what the Corvanian Empire learned. That humans are not just another species with military capabilities. They are the ultimate predator, and their favorite prey is anything that thinks it can defeat them.